Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. I am Chris.
And I'm AC.
And today we're going to be diving into a topic that's been gaining a lot of attention lately: bartering in the event of economic collapse. If cash loses its value, what will people trade? I mean, what's going to be that new currency of a survival-driven world? So stick around, because we're going to be covering 11 key items that could be invaluable for bartering in such a scenario.
Awesome. That's fun. I think we talked about this a little last time. I enjoyed bartering. I mean, not because it's some kind of societal collapse thing, but simply because, when you have an abundance of one thing and someone else needs that thing, it is kind of funny to, just to trade instead, right?
I completely agree. And we're not necessarily looking at, the bottle caps in Fallout. I don't know that those are actually going to carry any value forward, but certainly these are some items or things that you could have on hand already and not realize their intrinsic value.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I got to say, AC, you know what I like a little bit better than bartering?
What's that?
Reviews.
We've actually got a couple of good ones. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know, like both people that listen to us have emailed us in, but yeah. Did you we've got some good ones. No, was there one particular you like?
I'm going to go ahead and read this just kind of word for word. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but J Mize said, "This was the most tactical prepper cast I've ever heard, and I listened to a ton of them. No doom and gloom, and real non-sponsored recommendations that some I was aware of, but some not so much. The amount of real-world practical information was unexpected but appreciated. You guys are doing quality work here and has me laughing out loud more than anticipated." J-Mize, we really do appreciate that. And stick around to the end of the episode. We've got some goodies for you. This is going to be kind of an open invite, but you have to stay all the way till the end of the episode.
Yeah, I think that was particularly that. I think that was episode 5. He was talking about the tacticalness of the travel items. I'm pretty sure that was an episode 5 review, but yeah, no, that was a great review. That was awesome. So, a couple other things, just housekeeping items. I wanted to go back episode 8. If you don't mind talking about poop again, because I love talking about poop. But if we could, there were a couple. I got a couple of little emails and some Facebook stuff from people that reached out talking about a couple of things we mentioned in episode 8. And, let's keep in mind, obviously, Chris and I, neither one of us, we are not septic engineers. We're not, we're not plumbers. Obviously we do our research, but we did say that we do appreciate being fact checked. There were a couple things. I had a couple people mention Ridex when I'd said keeping something like Ridex on hand to help with sort of that healthy bacteria, healthy biome in the septic tank. And a lot of people had said, well, not a lot of people. Okay, 2 people. We take this shit seriously. So two people had said that you really don't need Ridex, and Ridex can in fact do more harm than good because, and I'm paraphrasing, but because basically that what's in your septic tank is a bunch of bacteria. And if you introduce other bacteria into it, like the Ridex, you can be introducing sort of competing colonies of bacteria, and it can actually sort of have the reverse effect, and it can be bad for the tank. Now, I would say that that is true probably in a perfect scenario. But the issue is that in the real world, people clean their toilets, and they put little Clorox tablets in the back of their toilet bowls to keep it clean, and they clean their showers, and they clean their sinks. And when you do that, you are doing it with a product that was specifically designed to murder bacteria. So if in a perfect world, if you don't clean your toilet and you're a really filthy person, you're exactly right that you probably don't need to introduce any kind of bacteria. But I can tell you being on site a couple of times for a septic cleaning, the guys, the professionals that do that kind of thing have told me they can look at what's called the scum layer. When you open it up and you're looking down at the solids that are there, they can look at it and tell you whether or not that person uses harsh cleaning chemicals. They can look at it and say, oh, that is void of bacteria. There's nothing living in that, because that person is likely pretty cleanly, and they have these like drop-in toilet tablets, which apparently really bad for septic systems. So the feedback would be that yes, in a perfect world, you probably don't need to introduce bacteria into your septic system. If you are someone that cleans your toilets and cleans your home, you actually probably do. Now, the reason to have Riddex on hand would probably be more for now than in an SHTF situation when you may run out of those harsh cleaning chemicals. The other thing that a couple of people mentioned is something called a black water valve. And I had two different people reach out to me on this as well about that. When we talked about if you had to, spray foam up your sewer line out of your house, and you may have black water come from the house. Well,
Right.
there's a something called a black water valve, and all homes built after 1988, it was code that you have to have these things. And basically what it is it's a little valve the exact shape of your sewer line, and it's in a little part where there's a downward slope, generally the lowest point in your home, down by the foundation where the sewer leaves your home. And what it does is it allows stuff to flow one way, but if anything ever starts backing up the other way, like water, it's buoyant. It's got a little float on it, and what it does is this little cap sort of floats up and it closes against the pipe. And that's obviously in a perfect world. Now, I have had so many contractors and insurance adjusters tell me that that's not how it works in real life. These things, sometimes they don't seal properly because you'll get solid waste, toilet paper, hair, whatever on this thing. So it can't seal properly. The other issue is that your shit turns into glue. And if you don't maintain these things, they'll just lay down, and it doesn't have enough buoyancy to sort of pop up. So yes, there is a black water valve on your home. Probably, Chris, your home's new. It probably has one. They're also something that probably needs to be maintained. And I would ask you, Chris, how many times have you maintained your black water valve?
I let it get sticky. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm guessing pretty much everybody anybody who's heard of it has the exact same the exact same answer, but most people haven't heard of it and doesn't know it exists. So yeah, you regardless whether you have one of these very cool little floaty valves or not, you probably are going to get black water. The other issue is even if that works, now you've shut your house off to the rest of the world, and anything you put down your drain most certainly is going to stop at that valve and back right up. So the black water valve isn't a fix for pretty much any of the stuff we said. So anyway, I mean, we've talked a bit about that, but I like it. We appreciate that. We appreciate the feedback. We appreciate the suggestions. And I'm probably speaking for you too, Chris, but we do like the fact checking. That's cool, and I like doing the research. So
Same here.
Yeah,
I love it. And now you're just reminding me, good bacteria, bad bacteria, it's all bacteria, so you can kill it with bleach.
That's right.
And that reminds me, I'm probably a bit behind on my chore list, but I can fix that.
You probably are. Yeah. If there's some scummy stuff in any of those wash basins, showers, toilets, then you're probably a bit behind. But you are not on a septic system, so you really don't have anything to worry about. Pour that bleach down there all day long, kill everything. But any of those cleaning chemicals, I think it's fair to say, if you read the back of the bottle, they all say it kills 99.999% of bacteria. That includes the friendly bacteria in your septic tank. So
I love it.
With that, I guess we can move on to our first item. And Chris, we have some very exciting news adjacent to item number 1. So feel free to cut me off at any point here, but I will go with item number 1 that I had when we're talking about some sort of...
Yeah, shoot. I'm super
go.
Excited for this.
This is
I
fun.
know what's coming.
Right? But so the non-conventional bartering items, I'm going to go with medication in general, and not, specifically, obviously, we're not doctors again. We probably need to talk about that because we're not. But a lot of medications, for the most part, I'm talking about the over-the-counter stuff in general, things that other people might need. They are good for a lot longer than their published shelf life. And in very, very rare occasions, could anything actually hurt you by taking medications like the over-the-counters, the Tylenols, the ibuprofens, those kinds of things? They're not going to kill you by taking them 4 or 5 years late. The efficacy may dwindle a bit. They may not be as potent, but those things are still going to be very valuable. It's the cold, dark, dry place to keep them. That's what they always say. But those kinds of things, I always, we talked about a little bit that in some kind of SHTF situation, you are not going to have the opportunity to just chill and take it easy. You're probably gonna have to work, and having things like the Tylenol and ibuprofen, that's huge. There's obviously some other over-the-counter medications, but those are the ones that come to mind for me. The fever reducers, really big, and the pain relievers, really big. And I'll tell you one thing I keep in my get home bag is ibuprofen, because anybody who doesn't run all the time, anybody who may just run on occasion or hike on occasion, knows that you're going to be banged up if you have to walk home 10, 20 miles in the wrong shoes.
Oh,
and
yes. Been there, done that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, doing it in combat boots is probably worse than doing it in a blown out pair of Merrells. But man, I'll tell you, that is a lifesaver. And I think that they're not going to be making new medications in some kind of Teotihuacan event. So the value on those goes up immediately. And the low grade over the counter pain relievers are the big one for me. I think that some of the Claritin type stuff, the Benadryl type stuff is going to be huge for over the counter medications. If you have allergies or simply get allergic to things, I'm pretty allergic to honeybee stings, and I hang out with those bastards all the time, but and so the Benadryls, those kinds of things can definitely save your life. And if you're someone who does have allergies, again, you're probably going to be out and exposed to things more often if you've got to work outside, if you have to support your group. The last thing I would mention as far as medications, and this is the exciting thing, antibiotics. We've talked about antibiotics on almost every episode, whether it's having travel tummy, whether it's being somewhere you don't want to be, and coming down with something and knowing how to treat it, or it's like last episode with exposed to bacteria that could kill you. And we have something extremely exciting to announce regarding antibiotics, that the guys at Contingency Medical have done us a huge solid and have a coupon code specifically for our listeners. So you don't need to write it down right now. It's Stakeholder 10, but we'll put it on our blog and on our website. And this is kind of cool. If you look at anything at Contingency Medical, they have they have EpiPens, they have a couple of different types of antibiotics and really large antibiotic cases that can be kept in cold storage till you need it. And something I would mention specifically about this, I'd said before, I bought a Jace case, and I listened to a really big nationally syndicated talk show, and they all generally partner with one of these guys, and they had a coupon. The coupon happened to be $5, and I didn't know that till you put it in. They just say, hey, use this code and you can get money off. And I think that's kind of how they are. I don't think there's particularly a ton of margins in antibiotics, maybe.
Yeah, I really couldn't tell you. I'm not in the industry.
I don't know. I mean, it's big pharma. Maybe there is, but I mean, a lot of these guys, there's just not a big coupon there, right? And I assume, this is just my assumption, is that maybe the person giving you the coupon makes X amount of money and you get some small amount of money off. Our coupon for Contingency Medical is a $10 off coupon, and that's because Chris and we aren't making any money on that. Nothing. There's no commission. There's no points. There's no free stuff. Absolutely nothing. We are giving you twice as much money off. And I realize $10 isn't a ton of money. We're giving you twice as much money off as any of these other coupons that I have seen out there, because we don't want anything out of it. We don't want any commission. We don't want anything. We don't want any free stuff. We don't even want the t-shirt. So we're doing this for you.
It's really one of those things we would much rather have our listeners be able to put their money to work better for them. And rather than us take a cut, we want you to really kind of embody being your own stakeholder. And this is one way you can do that. It's stakeholder10 at contingencymedical.com. It'll net you a $10 discount. You have to enter the code. There's no special link or anything like that. It's stakeholder10, all one word, and you get $10 off. And that's such a cool deal that Contingency is willing to do that for us. And I mean, they even told us, they've given us kind of a little bit of insight into how antibiotics really work, just so that we know better how to kind of present it to you. Because if you do go out and you get the instruction manual, everything is always coming from a licensed pharmacy, and you do have the prescription to go with it. So you know it's good quality, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know exactly how far, beyond the expiration date it's good for, or things like that. And that's what we're really kind of trying to relay.
And this is obviously, Chris, this isn't a sponsorship. We aren't sponsored. We're not getting anything out of this. So this is simply something Contingency Medical has done for us, for our listeners. And, but yeah, they were really, we asked a lot of questions, because we have questions about this. I really want to know, like, from a pharmacist, what's the actual line, and then what's the truth beyond the line. And they gave us some really good intel about this. So for antibiotics, and we do talk about antibiotics a lot, but so this is the last time we'll talk about it in a while. But when the pharmacy dispenses the medication, by simply taking it out of the original packaging, they're required by law to put an expiration date on it. And I don't know if it's a hard rule or not, but I don't think it's greater than a year. So simply they put a year on the antibiotics. That's how long they're good for. But when stored properly, antibiotics will retain their efficacy for years, like sometimes 2, 3, 4, even 5 years, even after that initial window. So they do start to lose efficacy, but it's interesting. They actually lose efficacy the second they come out of the original package, and they sort of degrade. So even if you're taking them within that original expiration date, they do degrade over time, starting immediately. But over an extended period of time, some antibiotics could become potentially harmful, but that's super uncommon. So, the real danger is that when they're initially prescribed, it's all about the dosage and being right for the size of somebody and making sure they're not allergic and things like that. And so that's why when you go with somebody like Contingency Medical versus the fishmoxicillin or something, they are actually prescribing this to you, and they give you those instructions. They give you the cool little booklet about when to use them and all those kinds of things. And then you have access to that pharmacist down the road. Once they're prescribed to you, you've got a 1-800 number. You can call those people, and you can interact with them or email them or whatever. So anyway, very cool. I guess the last thing to say about all medication, whether it's OTC or it's something that's prescribed to you, is storing it in the cool, dark, dry environment will definitely extend shelf life. So I think it's just a really cool thing that they have done for us, that Contingency Medical has done for us. And Chris, you said all one word, stakeholder 10, but it's stakeholder the number 10, all one word. So stakeholder 10 is the
exactly yes
is the code. Get $10 off. And yeah, I mean, I will use this myself, because we're not getting any free shit from them. So we talked about before, this is all the stuff I just mentioned is something you could use your health savings account or your flexible spending account on. And it's getting close to the end of the year where I've got a surplus. So I will likely go buy some stuff from Contingency Medical. They have one, I forget what it's called. I should have looked on their website, but they have like the little pack that's like eight medications. But then they have this Pelican case that's pretty expensive. I want to say it's, I don't know, $1,100-$1,200 maybe. And it's a ton of antibiotics, and they're all individually packaged and all this stuff. It's just a very cool presentation. And then from a non-traditional bartering perspective, pretty cool thing to have. So I make it one of those. But anyway, I think that's kind of cool. I think that's something they did for our listeners specifically. And yeah, I couldn't thank those guys enough, because like I said, they're doing this for us. We're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's certainly something that you could keep a member of your group alive. It's something to have on hand, but it's 110% something you need to get now, because
Right.
We've already covered number 1 out of our 11 key items. Before we dive into the rest of the list, AC, I do quickly want to define what we mean by kind of that collapsed economy, right?
Yeah.
So this could be anything from hyperinflation, where cash essentially becomes worthless. We've seen that in Venezuela and other countries where, it's literally less expensive to burn cash on the side of the road to heat up a gallon of water than it is to buy the wood to do it.
Yeah.
It goes completely backwards when you get into hyperinflation scenarios. It could be a societal breakdown where essential services fail. And we have actually listeners in 9 different countries, which is
That's crazy.
awesome. I can't believe we're actually international. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But speaking from a U.S. perspective, our entire economy is based on a just-in-time, also nicknamed the Amazon model. You order something, that's when it's packed, that's when it's shipped, and then it goes straight to you. So it's not farm to table, it's farm to factory storage facility, then to table. And if those services, if delivery fails, or if it's a hard grid down situation, you can no longer use the internet to order things, what are you going to turn to in order to get what you need? And that really is bartering, which is trading goods and services directly with one another. And the key here is to have items that are either in high demand or not easily accessible once that supply chain is disrupted. Antibiotics is a great example of that.
Sure.
As soon as the just-in-time economy takes a drink, that's when, good luck going to the pharmacy and ordering a prescription. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, everything. And it's funny. I was talking to a buddy who's big in kind of the grocery world as far as merchandising goes, and he had said that the average grocery store has about 3 days worth of food on hand. So that's how just in time things are. And you don't think about it because you go to the grocery store and you look at the shelves and there's 10 items deep, right? You look at the soup aisle and there's every single flavor of soup. There's 10 or 20 or 40 cans of every single flavor right there. But you just don't realize how many people in your community go to the grocery store every single day. And if there is a hiccup in that just in time inventory, then the shelves are empty. And I think we all kind of saw it during COVID, right? Where there were some little hiccups and all of a sudden there's no eggs or there's no butter or things like that. So
there's no toilet paper.
There's no toilet paper. That is panic buying. That's just crazy, people. I don't understand why everybody thinks they're just going to get the shits when anything happens. I don't understand that. It's the toilet paper. Don't get me wrong. Toilet paper is very essential, and we probably should have gone over that in episode 8. But I just don't get why that is the panic buying item. I get every other one. The toilet paper is the thing, like, I don't know, man, the election's tonight. I better have a lot more toilet paper on hand. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to me, but
yeah,
it falls right in line with the next thing on our list, which is non-perishable food. So canned goods, dried beans, dried rice, freeze-dried meals, those are all going to hold just immense value. You could probably get dental work done for an MRE at that point. But that also comes with a cost. So canned goods, they do expire. If they are dented, you run a higher risk of botulism. They do actually go bad. I've had a can of green beans that kind of went stale inside of the can.
You've actually had canned food that went bad?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's plausible. I've just never actually seen it, and I'll eat pretty much everything. That's crazy.
I will eat just about anything. And yeah, we had an old can of green beans. They weren't completely stored properly. We probably should have just gotten fresh green beans, but they do kind of take on a stale quality to their flavor. Nutritionally, they weren't broken down or anything like that. It wasn't, mush, but so all of that was there, but they just kind of had that stale flavor. Still a worthwhile bartering item. You get into things like dried beans and rice. If you've got 50 pounds of these and you actually portion them out into little snack size bags, each one of those you could probably trade for, another first aid supply, or if you needed service done, or something like that. If you do need to hire that sewer maintenance guy that lives in your neighborhood and his family is starving, dried beans and rice just bought you an extra 5 days on your septic system, so that could be worth it. And then freeze-dried meals, those are going to be your almost indefinite. Those are your 25-year shelf life that don't go bad. A lot of them, they don't taste the best because for some reason freeze-drying just sucks all the flavor out of stuff, but all of the nutritional value is still there. So this is one of those things, having non-perishable food on hand as a bartering item, something with that super long shelf life. Not only can you trade that item, but they do take up relatively little space and they can be stored for long periods. So how do you supplement that? That would be starting your garden or your greenhouse now and using that as much as you can for fresh veggies, and then just kind of leave and rotate your canned or your dried stuff. And another thing to look at here is how invaluable would something like bouillon cubes be? They take up hardly any room. The little jars of bouillon cubes, each one of those is a soup base for up to a gallon if you're trying to make a perpetual stew. That's going to go a very, very long way with somebody who's potentially starving. Same with instant coffee. If you've got fresh instant coffee that's just been aroma sealed the entire time, that's going to, I'll trade you your caffeine fix for that M1 carbine that you're carrying on your shoulder.
There's actually a lot when you start talking about the ingredients like the bouillon, and I can attest to that stuff is good forever because I have definitely eaten bouillon cubes like that were from the 1980s. There's nothing in them. They don't really go bad, but there are a lot of those. When you get more into the ingredients, there's a lot of stuff that has virtually no shelf life, like, flour, sugar, things like that, things that you can turn into food. They have virtually no shelf life. Honey is one that's very close to me, right? I mean, I have bees and I do honey. I harvest honey, and honey has virtually no shelf life. I don't think it does. I don't think honey goes, and that's one of those things that, it will be good forever. It's worth a lot of money now, but it will be worth a ton of money later. And as an ingredient, it's worth a lot more. Obviously, like salt, simply having salt is a big one. That's a food ingredient that has virtually no shelf life, that has a bunch of other qualities that you can use for all kinds of other stuff. One recently I heard of, so cornstarch is another one, virtually no shelf life. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, like making the stews, making the roux, things like that. Especially if you're going to start hunting wild game, things like salt and, the bouillon cubes and those kinds of things can really help with wild game. But yeah, cornstarch was one I hadn't really thought of. But again, virtually no shelf life.
Oh yeah, and imagine the motivational factor between you've had just red beans and rice with maybe a pinch of salt for the past 3 weeks, and somebody tosses you a bouillon cube.
Oh,
how much more is that going to levitate your spirit?
That's a little bit of happiness right there.
Exactly. So what else is on our list?
So, I'm going to kind of stick with the meds, but the first aid supplies are kind of a big one. You just have to imagine that right now, you get a paper cut and a Band-Aid is invaluable to you, but you couldn't imagine that if you are actually, again, working outside, if you're digging the latrine, if you are planting the garden, you are going to get just nicked and cut a lot more. And having things like the, isopropyl alcohol and having the bandages, those kinds of things, are going to be huge demand, right? A Band-Aid could be priceless in SHTF when they just aren't making anymore. You think about anyone who's injured and is in need of medical supplies, and they can't get them. Just having those in your bartering kit could honestly save a life. So that's a big one. I not too long ago, I was chopping wood, just chopping wood for winter, and I cut through my glove with an axe. I mean, it could have been a whole lot worse, and it wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough that it didn't nick my finger and it bled quite a bit. But I, big heavy leather gloves, and I'm trying to chop kindling, and I went right through my glove with an axe, and it was just bloody. It was just gross and bloody and dirty. And the only thing I had in the garage, I had purchased some of these old. They were like the Israeli bandages, the old big, bullet woundy bandages.
Oh, yeah.
But I just ripped one of those things open. I mean, that thing was like, it was old. I don't know how old, but it had the old smell. Like it smelled like your grandma's house. It was like that old, and and like mothballs and shit. But it was perfectly sterile and in perfectly good condition. However many years later, opened it up, used it. But yeah, the first aid supplies, I think, are something that, one, you can use them if you need them, but two, they really don't have expiration dates, and yeah, they're a great item for bartering. Like I said, I think those simple things are going to be in high demand if the grid goes down. Just having the ability to have the Band-Aids and clean out a wound and things like that, the triple antibiotic ointment, the wound dressings, those kinds of things. A lot of the stuff we mentioned in episode 7, all of that stuff is going to be in high demand. So I'm going to go with the first aid supplies. And again, any of those first aid supplies, something you could use your FSA or HSA money for. So if it's getting down to the end of the year and you've got any kind of money left over in your health savings account or a flexible spending account, you could just go buy a case of Band-Aids and it's all tax free. So those kinds of things, it's opportunistic buying, and you can store them virtually indefinitely. You will eventually use them, but if you don't use them, they're really good bartering items. So yeah, sticking with the medical thing, I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff, from the ointments and the bandages and the Band-Aids and the gauzes and those kinds of things. I think are really good to have.
And that's one of those things where each individual item potentially has its own value. I'll trade you 2 rounds of 22 for 2 Band-Aids.
Right.
Or I will trade you your water filter for this gauze pad. So It really kind of depends on how desperate the situation is going to play a lot into dictating the value of each item.
Yeah, it's crazy. You're not going to look at the price tag on anything anymore, right? It's truly everything's intrinsic value and its value to you right now in this moment. So it is kind of interesting that I think that there's maybe somebody teaches like course on bartering or something, but to get away from the, no, I'm not gonna give you this 30 carbine for that bandage because I paid way more money for the 30 carbine. It's like, well, it's not money anymore, bro, right? Like are you gonna bleed out or not?
Yeah, and that's a big part of it. And the next item on our list actually has historical anecdotal evidence of it being used in bartering. So next one on our list, it's a super high value item when it counts. It's ammunition.
Sure.
And in a collapsed economy, people may be relying on hunting or self-defense more than ever. You may end up having the Mad Max Raiders, driving down the road every night, and you just want them to be quiet. So you pull out the old AR-15 and let fly. Don't recommend doing that, but it's a possibility. But because guns may be the primary means of protection and acquiring food, ammunition is going to be almost invaluable because you can't, theoretically, AC, you could take your your bayonet and attach it to your rifle without cutting yourself this time and go charge somebody.
I've never seen that happen, but apparently you can do that. Sure.
But, or you can use it like a baseball bat. But the primary function of a firearm is to fire that particular round. And if you don't have the ammo, then its primary function is gone. And this is another thing to be very mindful of. If you are trading ammunition, it can be risky because you could be giving someone the tools to use directly against you.
Yeah, that's true.
But the historical anecdotal evidence that goes along with this, were you aware that this is where we got the term shot from? Like
No.
a shot of alcohol?
No.
So one drink of whiskey back in the day, the post-Civil War 1860s to 1890s, really the Victorian era, which was our wild, wild west.
Yeah.
You go into a bar, say, I want to drink, drink a whiskey, bartender slams it down, and you don't have any money. But you do have your 45 long Colt rounds on you, and you put one of those completed rounds next to that glass. He takes that round, and you get the drink. Because they had approximately the same value.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
And then your bartender goes and somebody comes in with cash and needs ammo, and he sells them the ammo that you just gave them, likely at a slightly higher profit because now he's getting cash for it. But that's where we got the term shot to equate to a single drink of whiskey.
So bartenders used to sell booze and ammunition. That was their job.
They were favorites of the yet-to-be-created ATF.
I guess. Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. No, I never heard that.
They had alcohol. They would sell you tobacco and smokes. They would sell you rounds and firearms, I'm sure. So really, it's probably old school bartenders that gave us the ATF.
Right, exactly. They were the issue. Yeah, their fault. Thanks, guys.
Now, if you wanted to go a step further with this, rather than purchasing, 10,000 rounds of 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO standard ammunition, or rather than going out and spending $18,000 to get 500 cans of 5.45 or 7.62 or 308 or whatever caliber you want to go with, ammo is not cheap anymore. One thing that you can do is if you really want to step it up, you can get all of the reloading equipment, including all of the books, the powder, the primers, the casings, the dyes, the bullets themselves. You can reload, and you can reload for yourself, but you can also barter your reloading skills. If somebody brings you a particular caliber and has, the dyes that you need, maybe it's time to start brushing off the old books and figure out exactly how much powder to add into each shell. And then if you're low on lead, a copper jacketed round going down an AR-15 barrel is designed so that the copper slips and doesn't foul up the barrel.
Right.
Will an AR-15 fire lead ammunition? Yes, to an extent, until the lead fouling clogs up that gas port, and then you're in trouble.
Then you just have a bolt action AR-15. Still works.
That's true. There are certain types of firearms that don't work well with solid lead ammunition.
Yeah.
But it's still better than nothing if you've got a 400-pound deer charging
and
you.
Think about how many of those bullets, we could talk about guns forever, but think about how many of those bullets are the same bullet and it's a different caliber casing. So if you've got that guy with his Gucci 22-250 and you've got a bunch of AR-15 rounds, that bullet, that 37 grain or 45 grain or 50 something grain 223 caliber bullet will fit in that 22-250 casing. So if you have the ability to reload, then a lot of those bullets are interchangeable with those super weird casings, right?
Yes. And I do that when I reload. I specifically look for different powders and primers and ammunition that is good for multiple applications. So I have a pile of, some of the listeners are going to hear this and think that I am absolutely batshit crazy. 180 grain, 308 diameter rounds.
Oh, wow.
They are long boys.
Yeah.
But I can fire, and I have my 308 hunting rifle zeroed to 180 grain. I can also load up my 300 Win Mag and go a little bit further.
Right. I was going to say a 300 Win Mag would take a 180 grain bullet too, right?
Yes, and it will go a lot a bit further with a lot more powder. But if I ever needed to, do something like load 9mm or 357 Magnum, I can have the bullet molds there, and then I can actually go to the local tire shop, the local mechanic, and grab up the buckets of old tire weights, and I can melt it down on my stove.
Right.
My wife is probably not going to like that one, so maybe outside.
I'd do it outside. Yeah, that'd be really bad for you. There's some lead
I can pour them into those molds, and then I've got basically an unlimited supply of 357 ammo.
Yeah, now you're talking about not just trading goods, but trading services. If you've got that person that says, hey, I kept my brass. I've got this super weird gun because I'm a whatever, 6.8 SPC or a 454 Kazul kind of guy or some other weirdo, then if you have the ability to reload those things because you can make the bullets and they still have their casings, then certainly now you're in business. Now, like you said, that gun is absolutely worthless without you. So your worth went up a whole lot right there.
And that's another thing that I have the ability to trade is just that skill to sit down patiently and quietly in the garage and go, thunk.
Yeah.
Just thunk with
pull
every
it and make a bullet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like it. That's awesome. No, for sure. I like I said, we keep threatening the obligatory gun episode. We need to do it. I think we could just say that might be the long one. That might be the double album because I know we'll just talk forever about it. But
we'll go on deep cuts with that one.
There'll be deep cuts and B-sides. We'll do that one. So my next one, I had sort of batteries and power sources, and I'm a big like alternative power guy. I've got all kinds of weird off-grid, power inverters and batteries and all kinds of stuff, and I could talk forever about solar batteries and chargers and things like that. But I will say that in a Teotihuacan type event, the world is going to be largely DC. And for people that don't know, I mean that it is not going to be like the plug in your wall that is AC. You're going to have like 12-volt stuff like car battery type systems, because inverters can be tough to come by, and there's just a lot more current that's demanded by DC or by AC systems. So things like the Energizer lithium batteries. I don't know if you've seen the little lithium batteries. They're light. They feel like there's nothing in them, but they will last for 15 years according to their website. Sometimes 20 years versus your standard alkaline AA type battery that would last for like 7 years. So you could buy some of these right now and just throw them in your safe. And again, you're going to use them. Eventually, you are going to put them in your flashlight. So it's not a waste. But things like that, like the D cell, C cell, AA, AAA batteries in that lithium that can last for a long time. That's a really long storage life. Man, just buy a case of those, throw them in your safe, and you won't think about them until you need them. But along the lines of energy storage, solar panels have an insanely long storage life. They don't really break down if you're not using them. So, I mean, a solar panel that you buy and throw in your garage and that isn't exposed to light, it can last 30 years pretty easily. I have heard of some manufacturers saying they could last for 40 years in storage. So solar, again, converting the sun's energy. Obviously, an installed panel, they're not going to last very long. I think they usually say the useful life on those is like 20 years. And when they say useful life, it's like when it's still making 50% of its original current and capacity and stuff. So if you,
yes, and that's a good point because we do have solar panels on satellites that's where they get the majority of their energy from.
Right.
Every once in a while, they'll do a thruster maneuver to reposition it and whatnot. But look at the Voyager missions, those went out in the 70s, and they
That's
still
crazy.
are getting enough solar energy to run that entire system. Granted,
Right.
it's the 70s, so it's
Yeah. I think
probably
those
less than
have a
your
little
cell phone.
baby reactor on them too that's doing something. But you're right, the panels last for a very long time. And again, the solar panels work better in cooler environments. So I imagine outer space, there's probably a lot less breaking down. They're more efficient the colder they get. But yeah, I'm gonna say that the world is going to be a lot more DC in some kind of SHTF. And one thing that you could buy now would be alternators, like a car alternator, which is what creates that DC current in your car, recharges the battery, things like that. It's kind of cool to like a standard, they call it a one-wire alternator, and it's generally the ones that are made for like a Chevy 350, kind of the most common alternator on planet Earth. But you can get these for like $80 on Amazon, and it's when it spins, it creates power, and it creates a ton of power. I mean, if you think about it, can create 60 to 70 amps. Some of the high amperage output ones are kicking out like 150 amps of DC power. And to put that in perspective, like a little solar panel, like let's say I'm trying to think of a size, like a 2 foot by 2 foot solar panel square, something like that. That thing's probably kicking out 4 to 5 amps in ideal conditions, meaning that when it's sunny. So if you can spin an alternator, you can get just an insane amount of energy out of them. And if you have just one of these little alternators, and hopefully everybody kind of knows what a car alternator looks like, but they're not very big, right? But a car alternator like that, you could run a water wheel. You could have you could make your own wind generator, and there's all kinds of really cool ways to do that. I've seen people do it with, you cut some 55-gallon drums in half and they'll spin, and all kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of things. You can have you could have a exercise bike with an alternator hooked up to it. You could have, a treadmill with your dog on it and a treat in front and just let them go. But yeah, if you can spin that alternator, then you can create an insane amount of power. And so maybe having a couple of these in stock, not just for yourself, but for a bargain item, is pretty cool. And, we do try to take it a little further than that. If you did want to be like a crazy person, you can actually make batteries. And I've done this before. There's a few different ways to do it, but basically it's pretty easy. If you have two dissimilar metals and like metal electrodes and some kind of electrolyte fluid, you can make a battery. You can make a battery out of a lime if you have, I want to say it's like zinc and copper maybe, or something like that. But it's pretty easy. Like if you have copper and aluminum, so like a copper electrode, you could use a penny if you wanted to. Pre-64 pennies, because I think after that they're like 97% zinc, but older pennies, if you had a copper penny and a strip of aluminum and like a paper towel as a membrane soaked in some kind of electrolyte solution, like just salt water basically.
Okay.
That will generate some amount of power. You can take those two dissimilar metals, some kind of electrolyte solution, and you can hook up your multimeter and you can make a battery. So you can get pretty creative with that. Obviously everybody's heard of like the potato powered clock, right? That's one. Or you can take pennies again, pre-64 pennies, and nickels, because they're made out of nickel, go figure, and something like vinegar. You can put those together and you would actually create voltage. So those are all DC voltage, like I talked about. But there's a way to make batteries out of a lot of, you can do some research online. It's kind of cool. But if you wanted to make and store energy in some kind of SHTF event, you could do that.
And I've seen videos of people doing this and basically building a dry battery,
right?
And they just don't add in the electrolyte solution
right
until they're ready to use it. And I think the guy built like 500 of them, and then he soaked down maybe 8 of them, but he was charging his cell phone and using his cell phone off of it.
No, you can do that. Yeah, it's a couple of dissimilar metals that you've got laying around everywhere, and some kind of electrolyte type solution. And I've seen a lot of people do it in mason jars, because you can basically put these electrodes through the top, and just like you said, make this dry battery. So electrodes through the top, down to the mason jar, screw the lid on, and as soon as you fill that up with an electrolyte or a vinegar, then yes, they immediately start storing power. And obviously, batteries the second they are a chemical reaction. That's how they work. So the second you activate those, they start losing efficacy. They do eventually go bad. But yeah, you can make a rechargeable battery out of just about anything like that. So just keep that in mind. There's some research to do, but yeah, alternative power is going to be huge. And yeah, like you said, something like that could generate just enough volts to charge a cell phone or a flashlight or things like that, a radio, it could be invaluable.
That takes us to the next thing on our list, which is also something that can give you a buzz. Alcohol and tobacco.
Dad joke. Close. That was terrible.
I had to. But alcohol and tobacco, we've seen it in movies and TV shows where people are, trying to be super tough, and you can tell they're jonesing for something.
Yeah.
But alcohol and tobacco, they are vice items. But historically, they've been pretty much top tier bartering goods during hard times.
For
for
sure.
several reasons. I mean, alcohol, not only can you drink it, as long as it's the right kind of alcohol. I don't suggest going around and making wood alcohol. That's pretty much how you go blind. But grain alcohol is different than wood alcohol, and it can be used for disinfecting wounds. It can be used for stress relief, we'll call it that. It can be used for lighting a fire. So if you are that SOL that you have no fire starting equipment, all it takes is 100 proof alcohol, douse a cotton ball and spark it, and it's going to light your fire. Tobacco, yeah, although it is very harmful in the long term, it's definitely going to be a craving item for smokers, vape users, things like that. So if you don't use those items yourself, you can go, and if you are not a drinker, I still recommend go to the liquor store, get a 175 bottle of cheap whiskey, cheap vodka, cheap gin, and then maybe something a little bit higher quality like Everclear, something that's super high proof that you could use to disinfect, and just store it. It's not going to go bad as long as it's sealed. It's not like that, 1859 Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, whatever, that turns to vinegar because it's so low proof. It's high enough proof, it doesn't go bad, and it doesn't evaporate as long as it stays closed. Same thing with tobacco. If you go to the local smoke shop and get a 1 pound brick of tobacco, like you would see for a pipe smoker back in the day.
Sure, yeah.
Those are usually vacuum sealed, and they still have a little bit of moisture in them. They're not, the oxygen absorbers aren't in there, but they're vacuum sealed. So there's just nothing but a brick of tobacco there. You can stack them up, just throw them in the corner of your prep closet or your bunker, whatever you have. And now you have that as just a bartering item. If you don't use it, put it to good use.
Yeah, that's actually really good. I didn't think about that. I'm not a smoker, but sure, that I might do that, because you're right. It just sits there. You don't use it. Yeah. Now it's funny. You can make alcohol too, right? I mean, we could probably do a whole episode on this, so we probably should sometime. But stills, copper stills, and stainless steel stills, pretty easy. I mean, if you watch a couple of videos online, you can make booze and you can make fuel. I would recommend probably not going with the copper and getting like a copper additive. They make like that copper, it's like a foily thing. I think you would use it for cleaning, but you could get a chunk of copper. And the whole thing about copper is that it's a catalyst. There's a chemical reaction that basically, it reacts with the undesirable sulfur compounds that are produced during fermentation. So if you're going to make booze and fuel, I recommend not going with the more expensive copper and having just some copper laying around. But you can also, you can make alcohol with a still. Now, like you mentioned, going blind, I think that's actually a function of the methanol. Methanol boils at a lower temperature than ethyl alcohol, and it concentrates like at the beginning of the distilling process. So I think they call it like the 4 shots. Discard that, or the tails, I've heard it called. Then you probably won't die. But just, that's something to look into. Again, like if you don't want to stock this stuff, you just have the ability to make it. And anything with sugars can be turned into alcohol. So, all that rotten fruit out of your pear tree that you don't know what to do with, you could turn that into booze with a very inexpensive still. So that's another one. And as long as we're talking about the gardening, I think the next item I had on here was garden seeds. And I have I do a big garden every year. I mean, I have seeds, and it's crazy. I think a lot of people will say swap your seeds out every 2 to 3 years. But I mean, you can read articles online all the time where people found old seeds somewhere, or they got like these super old seeds on discount, and people will say that they will germinate after 10, sometimes even 20 years. So, I mean, cycling the seeds out is good if you want a really high germination rate. But if you're just trying to do starters and see what starts, man, you can keep seeds forever. And you can buy seeds now in these vacuum sealed packages. You can vacuum seal them yourself. And as long as you're getting like heirloom seeds that I do, then you can reuse those seeds every year. You can take the fruit like tomatoes and you can harvest those seeds out of there, dry them out, and you can plant that same tomato next year. So as long as you're buying the heirloom seeds, that's huge. So yeah, I do a decent garden, and the seeds are big. I've got some Thai chili peppers that I have been growing every year from the same batch of seeds that I got way long ago, and they're awesome every single year. But seeds are something that I think in some kind of SHTF situation, they're going to be invaluable. The people that know how to grow food, I mean, that's huge. Those are the people that get to stay put, right? We talked about back in the day, you had the hunters and the gatherers, and if you were somebody that knew how to start farming, then you were the person that got to stay put on your homestead. So
yes,
seeds, huge.
Very, very much so.
Yeah. So that's big. I mean, that's not, it's easy. Obviously that's something you just got to kind of go read about that stuff, but heirloom seeds, they're going to last forever. And there's a lot of these companies like Patriot Supply that are doing like an acre worth of all kinds of fruits and vegetable seeds in a little vacuum sealed packet. So that's a good one.
It is important to start that now before something happens,
right?
Because
right.
If you were trying to wait for your crop of corn on your 1 acre plot to come up to feed your family,
right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're probably a little bit behind the curve there. So it's one of those things you really do need to have experience, practice now, get all the kinks out, and then go forward.
Yeah. Practicing the garden is kind of tough. You're right, but that's something to do. That's something to do now. What did you have else? What else is on the list?
So my next one is going to be the gross one that we always like to talk about: hygiene products. So things like soap and toothpaste are going to prevent those oral infections from eating, with busted open lip after getting into it with a 350 Chevy alternator. One thing that never gets addressed is feminine hygiene products. Things like tampons, pads, period panties. I know in our bug out bag, my wife has several pairs of period panties that's what they're designed for. They're reusable, rewashable.
When she hears you say period panties, you're going to sleep on the couch for the next week, right?
Probably not the couch, but maybe the spare bed. I'll see how that goes.
But a lot of those, to be fair, have other uses too, right? I mean, like you've talked about that in combat, right? Like some of those sterile products can have a ton of other alternate first aid uses.
Oh, absolutely. And you look at having your suture kit ready to go that, like we talked about in episode 7, have that sterile environment in a box, if you will. Things like tampons. There's a big kind of misnomer around plugging a wound with a bullet hole with a tampon.
Yeah.
A bullet is going to create a much larger shock cavity on the inside. So yes, you are plugging the leak, but it's still bleeding on the inside. So that's where quick clot comes in.
But like an impaling wound, some kind of like a rougher knife wound, the fallen on the piece of jagged metal or something like that.
that's where you want to go with your tampon to stop
Got
the
it.
bleeding.
Okay.
Precisely. And that's one of those things that unless you look at ballistic gel blocks and you look at reviews on what rounds can do when they enter,
Sure.
you're just not going to realize there's a massive cavity behind it.
Right. Yeah. And so, but you mentioned soap too. Soap is like another one of those indefinite shelf life. Like a bar of soap is going to last forever, and it's got all the uses. You think about when you run out of shampoo, the hair, you're still going to have bar soap, things like that. So bar soap is it's going to be good for everything. You can wash your dishes with it. Think about all those other soap products. Just having a stash of bar soap, it's going to last forever. And one other thing that I'll mention with bar soap, I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard this. A buddy of mine told me this, so thank you, Rob. But the Irish Spring bar soap, rodents don't like it. They don't like the smell.
Interesting.
I don't know if you've heard this, dude. I'm telling you, it's a thing. I had so many issues with mice in my trailer, and I just could not evict them from my little battery box. And I cut up some little pieces of Irish Spring soap. I don't know what's in it. Probably something extremely toxic you shouldn't put on your body. But I'm telling you, man, the rodents, they do not like it. They do not like it. I've had a number of friends tell me, cut it up, put it like in their, cars they have in storage of the RVs and stuff. Irish Spring, buy yourself a case of Irish Spring bar soap. There's 1,000 uses for it, and one of them is to evict mice.
And that's going to keep all of your other supplies healthy and hantavirus free, because in a post-collapse world, hygiene equals health and health equals survival. So that's really a pro tip.
100%.
You can also learn to make your own soap. If you wanted to look at basic lye soap making, using ashes, it's doable. Ashes and animal fat will render down and give you soap.
Yeah,
now,
that's right.
We're not taking it to the Tyler Durden level of anything like that, but you can make soap.
You can also get those Fight Club forms, by the way, which is pretty cool. Like, no, I'm not kidding, because I bought. You can get them for taking like bee wax. When you're done with the honey, what's left over, you can boil that down and actually harvest the wax from the bees. And I just make little blocks with them. I don't know what I'm ever going to do with them. But there are things, you make candles, whatever. But yeah, you can buy the little portable Fight Club form to make your.
That's awesome.
You could make your Tyler Durden soap, which would be pretty badass.
That's epic. I'm gonna have to learn how to do that.
So I had on here, I'd like just tools were one thing that I think a lot of people don't think about, like just your basic tools. Because again, we're talking about something with no shelf life. Hammers, screwdrivers, multi-tools, things like that are going to be, they're just going to be so invaluable when you have to start fixing shit on your own. And something I do all the time is, like, if I'm going to Home Depot and whatever it is I need, I always just walk by the screw aisle and I grab like a box of screws or a box of nails. I do this all the time and just have them in storage, because I'm going to use them eventually doing something. And they're not very expensive, but that's something that, man, in end times, you're not making nails. You're not making screws. Can you imagine trying to make a single screw? That would just be absolutely invaluable. And the fact that
that's too pokey on the fingers for me.
It's this helicoily thing. You can make them now. I think you can make nails with a like an anvil. I've seen people make nails, but a screw, you're not going to do it. So having those kinds of things, and then some of the older hand tools that we just don't think about anymore, like knee drills, like actual old analog drills, like when your power drill doesn't work anymore.
Oh yeah.
When the old DeWalt doesn't work anymore, there are hand drills. They drilled shit before we had batteries. So those kinds of things. And saws are another thing, like large crosscut saws, 2-man logging saws, things like that. Think about all the things you can do with a saw. There's a couple of different kinds. I don't know. I'm not going to get into like saw theory here, but the saw that you would normally 2 guys would chop a tree down with are different than the saw that you would make lumber with, because what they call a crosscut saw, they don't have as much of a set on the teeth, meaning the teeth aren't as far apart from one another. And they're not as bent outward, I guess is the way to say it. I'm trying to give you a visual, but basically what that means is they're a little harder to saw with, but they make a flatter board on one side. So if you're trying to make lumber, it's kind of a different saw than making timber. But having a couple of 2-man saws, they're inexpensive. I bought one recently, like a military surplus 2-man crosscut saw. And it's a cool thing to have. They just look cool. You can hang on the wall in your garage, but they it's kind of a very cool thing that if you ever did need to actually make lumber, you could do that. And yeah, you can with a simple crosscut saw, you can do quite a bit with them. So that's something I would recommend. Kind of the hand tools, and think about the tools that you probably don't use now. Have you ever heard of a Scotch auger, Chris? Do you know what this is?
No.
You got to look it
Can't.
up. It's the coolest thing, and they're very inexpensive. It's basically, it's got a helicoil, like a screw on one end and a circle on the other end, and it's almost shaped like a hammer. But basically what you would do is, with the helicoil end, you would put like a stick through the top, and you could crank this thing into a log, and it makes a hole. And then the hole on the top of it, like the hammer head that's got a hole in it, you can hit a branch, and it makes the branch into the shape of the hole that you just made by turning the helicoil, if that makes sense.
Oh,
So
okay. I think I've seen videos of these, but I never knew they were called a
it's called a
Scotch auger.
Scotch auger. Very cool. So you could basically, what I'm saying is, you can easily make like feet for like chair legs or a table leg. You could make a very easy table out of things you could find in the forest. You can make a sawhorse pretty easy. If you had a fallen log and 4 branches, with this, you could make like a sawhorse or a bench or that kind of thing. Very
Nice.
cool hand tool to use, kind of like, Amishy style thing. But yeah, that's something that I would put on there. That's go get one, play with them. They're very inexpensive. I think, probably sub $20 on Amazon, and they're really fun to play with if you want to, like, sort of the Fisher Price My First Bushcraft tool. That would be it. Like, you could go, if you want to start bushcrafting, it's not very sharp. It's kind of hard to hurt yourself, but you can do some cool stuff with one.
I like it.
Yeah.
So we're down to our last 2 on the list. I think the next one has to be clothing and blankets, because if something happens and you don't have that electric heater, or there's a natural disaster, and then
Sure.
you get weather changes, you need to stay warm and dry. And durable, weatherproof clothing or warm blankets, even wool blankets, they can be an absolute lifesaver. So in things like colder climates, it could be worth more than gold if somebody is really looking to stay warm. So I don't know if you've ever been in this position where you walked and walked and walked and your feet are sweating, and by the time you get home and take off your shoes, it's like you were going through a riverbed, even though you were on the sidewalk the entire time.
Yeah, of course. Sure. Yeah.
How much better do you feel by putting on a pair of fresh, clean socks? And that's something that
I'm a socks whore. Let me tell you, man, we could do a whole episode on why you should have a bunch of new socks everywhere. But absolutely, I couldn't imagine if in a world without socks, man, I don't want to live there.
And socks are not something that you have to really worry about size. You don't have to look for, your pant size. Oh, I'm a 33, 34 inseam. I need, XYZ.
No, they're pretty universal.
Socks are socks, and they're going to handle everything. But having a stockpile of spare clothes for you, your family, maybe your neighbors, but spare socks, that's something that you could potentially trade and make a living off of if you really wanted to.
And keep in mind, any clothing that doesn't fit you anymore is insulation, right? I mean, you can use clothing for insulation. Any kind of those synthetic fibers work really well for insulation. I always keep a couple of those, like the military wool blankets, just in the trunk of the car. That's kind of like, not really the get home bag, but just, if you ever happen to, you run out of fuel in the snowstorm type thing, just to help insulate the car. It obviously could be priceless in those kinds of situations.
And if it does get cold, this is something that AC, I don't know how much camping experience you have, but it seems counterintuitive. Sleep naked.
Right.
If you're in your sleeping bag and you've got your socks, your lining pants, your undershirt, t-shirt, sweatshirt, and then your flannel, and then you've got everything on, you're actually choking off what your sleeping bag can do. So if you
Right.
just go in there with a pair of boxers and maybe socks and a skull cap, you are going to get a lot warmer than if you are trying to layer up while you're in your sleeping bag and taking a nap.
Yeah, and back to your socks point also, if you're in some kind of sleeping bag that's, super well insulated, those 0-degree bags, they don't breathe very much. So if you start sweating in that bag and you're in your only pair of clothes, you're burning a lot more energy. Those clothes are going to be wet when you want to wear them the next day. They're going to be cold. So no, you're exactly right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And all right, we're down to our last one. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one that I go both ways on this, and I bet everybody listening goes both ways on this. But the golds and precious metals, I think this is kind of like, to a lot of people, it's probably half the audience that goes, well, that's an obvious one. That's not crazy, and that's actually all I own is gold and silver. And then there's probably a lot of people saying that it doesn't have a ton of intrinsic value, and if the dollar's worthless, so is gold and silver. And I would say that personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. I will tell you, I do own a little bit of precious metals, both gold and silver. And, I get where people are talking about, where they're saying, hey, in some Teotihuacan event, it's going to be worthless. It's not going to do anything for you. But I would argue to those people that Roman gold and silver coins, are those worthless after the fall of Rome? Nobody uses those anymore. They're not worth anything. Byzantine coins, worthless. I mean, so
I would like one, please.
I would like one, yeah. So anyway, I would say that, although sometimes we talk about the end of the world as we know it, that is things like that. Some pretty hard SHTF events have happened in the past, and things like precious metals have always come through. They've always outpaced the dollar. They've always had some kind of value to people. So I don't know what your personal opinion is on them. Like I said, I'm kind of in the middle. I don't have 100% of everything I own in freaking Pamp Swiss 24 karat gold bars, but I don't brush them off either.
Yeah, I'm not the kind of guy who drops the entire life savings into renting a gold bar from Fort Knox, but there are a lot of other options. So my wife and I have looked at something called a combi bar, and we'll have a link to this. There are several places that you can get these, but they're either gold or silver. They come in copper. They do come in aluminum. It's about the size of a credit card, maybe a little bit bigger, but it's 50 grams of whatever that precious metal is.
Okay, sure.
And the way they're stamped, they kind of break off easily into 1 gram segments. So you're not handing over the entire thing for the service or for the goods or whatever. It's all right. I will give you 2 grams of gold for your spare tire.
I think they call that pre-divisible. Is that what they call those bars? They're pre-divisible bars?
Yeah, it's something like that. They're stamped, so they're really easy to break with just your fingers. They come in a little case so that you don't accidentally break it.
Yeah, they're scored, and each one of those little pieces that's scored into says how much of that particular metal it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are really nice because it's only 50 grams. With the price of gold and silver right now,
it's crazy.
They're kind of nuts. But if you do maybe use your year-end bonus or your signing bonus or something like that to purchase one of these, gold and silver 100% do not have an expiration date.
That's right.
So it's not going to go bad. You just have an investment. And if shit never hits the fan, you can always resell it. It's still 50 grams of gold. Maybe you make a profit.
Right. You're not going to lose money on those. Now, one thing I will say is that in SH right now, you can go down to the precious metal guy, and there's a store that I use that I like. They're very nice to me, and I've bought and sold precious metals there. But they have little magic machines to test whatever it is you're bringing them, and you're getting real gold and real silver. But you think about in an SHTF event, how do you know if you are trading someone for real gold or real silver or other precious metals?
You mean, did I just melt down a bunch of pennies and put them in a...
Right? Yeah. Put them in a form, put them in the... If you try to sell me the Fight Club soap bar mold full of that looks like gold. I'm not going to believe you. But yeah, so the
there goes my plan.
But so there's a couple different ways to do that. The easiest one, obviously, you have a magnet. You're going to know at least that someone isn't trying to pass off something ferrous. And if you have a magnet and a scale, a lot of those bars are stamped with what they weigh, like you said, 50 grams or whatever. So you have an accurate scale. You're going to be maybe slightly okay. The next step up there is you can buy online very, very inexpensive, what's called an acid etch test, which is basically you just scratch it on like a little super fine piece of sandpaper and drop a little tiny bit of this, whatever the acid is on there, and it turns a certain color based on what precious metal it is. So now the plus is you know exactly what it is. The downside is that it only tests the surface. So if maybe someone is getting real creative and they've got a gold-plated bar or something they're trying to pass off, you may not know. Now, obviously, with an acid etch test and a magnet and a scale, you're probably going to be really good. The way that the precious metal guy does it is they have something called a precious metal verifier. It's like a PMV, and they basically use, it's kind of cool. They use electromagnetic waves to penetrate into the coin or bar, like past the plating. So the plating and surface doesn't really matter. And they even test them like in the little plastic sheath. So it like knows. So they set them on the scale. They know what it's supposed to weigh, including the tare weight of that piece of plastic. And then it will tell you exactly what kind of metal that is. But those things are like $1,000. Now, that seems expensive now. But if you are planning on being the precious metal guy or gal in the apocalypse, that might be something to invest in now. Because again, that's going to be priceless when people are trying to decide whether or not they have real gold and real silver bars.
That's very true. So there you have it. That is a list of 11 items that you could use to barter with in the event of a collapsed economy. But if you're still listening, we appreciate it.
And we went away. So we went pretty long here. So these are the troopers that stuck this one out.
Yes, but here's the reward for that. AC, do you like free stuff?
I have been a fan of free stuff in the past. Yeah.
Okay. And we know you like bartering. Do you like bartering. Movies?
Love movies. You're ticking all the boxes for me today.
All right. So what if I told you I would barter with you movie tickets for a simple share of the podcast?
I think
would that be worth it?
I think that is more than worth it. Anybody can hit the share button. And so tell me, what movie are you sending me to see? Because this is something I've already seen. I'm not in.
So this is a brand new movie. This is by Angel Studios. It is a movie called Homestead, and it is based on the books, the Black Autumn series, which is a big part of my personal library. It's a great series by Jeff Ross and Kirkham.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a prepper's movie all the way through from start to beginning. It is a prepper's movie. It has not been released yet. The release date is supposed to be December 20th.
Okay.
We went out and spent our own money and bought 200 advanced release tickets.
That is a whole bunch of money.
So here's the deal. If you are still listening and you send us a screenshot of sharing the podcast, either sharing the Facebook post, sharing the podcast, sharing a Twitter repost, anything like that, if you email us at stakeholderprepping@gmail.com, send us a screenshot of that, and we will send you a code for 2 free tickets. All you gotta do is find your theater that's playing it, schedule your tickets, you get a code for 2 free tickets. We've got 200 of them, so it's 100 first come, first serve. Whoever gets them first, you get your tickets. But this is an awesome movie. All of the trailers for it look phenomenal. It is Homestead by Angel Studios. Release date is supposed to be December 20th. But email us with your share, and you get 2 free tickets. Is that fair? Is that a good barter?
I think that is. I think that we're getting the shit end of that deal. But no, let's do it. I think it's just that easy. So yeah, go out, share it. I mean, get creative too. I mean, if you just want to stand on the side of the freeway with maybe our logo and have somebody take a photo, like I'm cool with that. Maybe it's a really good review, but yeah, anything you can do to help us out. And yeah, email us the screenshot, email us the photo, and yeah, we'll get you a couple of tickets. So I think that's really exciting. Something else I wanted to make sure that people do know that our blog does exist. So not just on our Facebook page and not just on the Twitter account that's new, but stakeholderprepping.com. If you go there, any of the things that we've talked about, any of this stuff, our code for contingency medical, all of that stuff, every episode we release a blog with pretty much a synopsis of what we talked about and any of the products we talked about, links to those things. And obviously we'll talk about the tickets to Homestead there. We'll talk about the code for contingency medical. So just make sure that that you do check that out if you have any questions about any of the stuff that we're talking about. And then our obviously our website or our Gmail account is there too. So you can send us an email through the website if you like.
And next week is going to be a big one. We officially have our first guest. I'm going to keep that one a little close to the chest. But we do have an expert coming in, a field expert who does this kind of thing for fun. So be sure to tune in next week for our very first guest. But until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder.